I stared at the plate of food in front of me, Derek's words still ringing in my ears. Wow, Lo, I didn't think it was possible, but your cooking gets worse every day. I sighed, setting down my fork. Is it really that bad? I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. Derek scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Worse. I wouldn't even feed it to a stray dog. You can't cook, you can't clean, and you can't even give me a kid. What good are you? His words cut deep, piercing the fragile remnants of my self-esteem. I opened my mouth to respond, but his mother, Gwen, beat me to it. Now, Derek, she chided, though her tone held no real reproach. Don't be too hard on the girl. It's not her fault she's a failure in every sense of the word. I flinched, her insult stinging like a slap to the face. It wasn't the first time they'd belittled me, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. Living with Derek and his mother was a constant battle, a war of attrition against my very soul. As I cleared the table and set about washing the dishes, my mind drifted back to the countless times I'd tried to conceive, only to be met with disappointment and Derek's scathing remarks about my inadequacy. The words barren and useless echoed in my mind, taunting me with my perceived failures. Little did they know, I had recently discovered something that would change everything. While scrolling through social media forums, I came across a series of posts made by Derek himself, mocking my lack of culinary skills and expressing his desire for a divorce. He painted himself as the victim, a man trapped in a loveless marriage, seeking sympathy from strangers online. As I finished the dishes and retreated to the solace of my bedroom, I couldn't help but feel a sense of determination rising within me. For too long, I had allowed Derek and Gwen to diminish me, to strip away my sense of self-worth. But no more. It was time to take control of my life, to break free from the shackles of their cruelty. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to fight for my happiness, my dignity, and my future. This was just the beginning, the spark that would ignite a fire of change, burning away the chains that had bound me for far too long. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of Derek's voice, already berating me for some perceived failure. Leela, where's my clean shirt? I have an important meeting today, and you couldn't even do one simple task. I hurried into the living room, bleary-eyed and still in my pajamas. I'm sorry, Derek, I'll get your shirt ready right away. Gwen clicked her tongue disapprovingly. Honestly, Lila, it's like you don't even try. No wonder my son is so disappointed in you. I bit my tongue, holding back the retort that threatened to spill forth. Instead, I scurried to the laundry room, grabbing Derek's freshly pressed shirt from the pile of clean clothes. As I handed it to him, he snatched it from my grasp, his expression one of disdain. Took you long enough. At this rate, I'll be late for work. I'm sorry, I mumbled, but he had already turned away, his attention focused on his phone. The rest of the day passed in a blur of monotony. I went to work, enduring the usual drudgery of my insurance job, only to return home and face the endless cycle of chores and criticism. Derek and Gwen seemed to take particular delight in pointing out my every flaw, no matter how insignificant. Did you even bother cleaning the bathroom today? Gwen sneered as I entered the kitchen to start dinner. Of course I did, I responded, my voice weary. Well, it doesn't look like it, Derek chimed in, his tone dripping with contempt. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised. You're useless at everything else. Why would cleaning be any different? I fought back tears as I turned my attention to the stove, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Little did they know, their constant jabs were only fueling the fire burning within me, a fire that would soon consume their complacent cruelty. As the evening wore on, another source of tension emerged, Derek's gambling addiction. He had been losing money at an alarming rate, and the stress of his mounting debts was palpable. You need to get your shit together, Gwen hissed, her voice low but venomous. If you keep pissing away our money like this, we'll end up on the street. Derek slammed his fist on the table, his face flushed with anger. Back off, Mother. It's none of your business how I spend my money. It is when you're gambling away our future. Gwen shot back, her eyes blazing with fury. I watched the exchange unfold, a twisted sense of satisfaction creeping over me. Their dysfunction, their toxicity, it was all coming to a head, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the whole house of cards came crashing down. As I lay in bed that night, The weight of Derek's emotional and financial abuse pressing down on me, I made a decision. No more would I be the victim, the punching bag for their cruelty. It was time to take control, to exact my revenge and reclaim my life. The thought filled me with a sense of determination, a steely resolve that would carry me through the battles to come. Derek and Gwen had no idea what was in store for them, but they would soon learn the true cost of their actions. The breaking point came a few nights later, when Derek stormed into the house, reeking of alcohol and anger. "Where the hell is my dinner, woman?" he slurred, his words slurring together. I stepped out of the kitchen, wiping my hands on a towel. "It's almost ready, Derek. Just give me a few more minutes," he sneered, his eyes narrowing. "That's what you always say. Useless, just like everything else you do." Before I could respond, Gwen chimed in from the living room. "Don't talk to her like that, Derek. She's trying her best." "Her best?" he spat, rounding on his mother. "Her best is pathetic. I should have left this worthless sack years ago." Something inside me snapped at his words. Years of pent-up frustration, anger, and resentment came bubbling to the surface, and I couldn't hold it back any longer. "That's enough," I shouted, my voice trembling with fury. "I've had it with your constant abuse, your endless belittling. I'm not going to take it anymore." Derek's eyes widened, caught off guard by my sudden outburst. "What did you just say to me?" "You heard me," I continued, emboldened by my newfound courage. "I'm done being your punching bag, your emotional doormat. I deserve better than this, better than you." Gwen opened her mouth to interject, but I cut her off with a sharp glare. "And you're just as bad as he is, enabling his behavior, joining in on the insults. Well, no more." I turned back to Derek, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "I'm leaving you, Derek. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to make sure you pay for every ounce of suffering you've put me through." For a moment, Derek was speechless, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Then his expression twisted into one of rage. "You ungrateful bitch," he snarled, taking a step towards me. I stood my ground, unflinching. "Don't even think about it," I warned, my voice low and steady. "I'm not the same doormat you've been kicking around all these years." With that, I brushed past him, ignoring his sputtered threats and insults. I quickly packed a bag with some essentials and headed for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped outside, I took a deep breath of the cool night air, a sense of freedom washing over me. I knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt alive, invigorated by the prospect of reclaiming my life. I made my way to my brother Jason's house, knocking on the door with a newfound sense of purpose. When he opened it, his eyes widened at the sight of my disheveled appearance and the bag slung over my shoulder. "Lila, what's going on?" I steeled myself, pushing back the tears that threatened to spill forth. "It's over, Jason. I'm leaving Derek for good this time." Without hesitation, he ushered me inside, wrapping me in a comforting embrace. As I clung to him, the weight of years of abuse finally lifting from my shoulders, I knew that this was just the beginning of my journey towards reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my sense of self-worth. And Derek and Gwen? They would soon learn the true meaning of karma, the consequences of their actions rippling outward like a tidal wave, sweeping away the foundations of their smug superiority. After recounting the years of abuse I had endured at the hands of Derek and Gwen, Jason and his wife Emma were furious. Emma's eyes blazed with anger as she pulled me into a tight hug. "That bastard," she spat. "How dare he treat you like that? You don't deserve any of this, Lila." Jason nodded in agreement, his jaw clenched. "We're going to make him pay for what he's done. You have our full support, sis." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, grateful for their unwavering support. With their help, I knew I could finally break free from Derek's toxic grip. Over the next few days, we hatched a plan. First, I contacted a divorce lawyer to begin the legal process of separating from Derek. The lawyer assured me that with the evidence of his abuse and financial misdeeds, I had a strong case for securing alimony and a sizable settlement. Next, we turned our attention to building a solid case against Derek. Jason and Emma helped me gather documentation of his gambling debts, his online rants, and any other evidence we could find to expose his true nature. "We need to hit him where it hurts," Emma said, her voice steely with determination. That money-grubbing prick needs to learn that there are consequences for his actions. It was then that I remembered Derek's estranged aunt, May. She had always been critical of his behavior, and she held the keys to the family inheritance. If we could get her on our side, it would be a devastating blow to Derek and Gwen. I reached out to May, explaining the situation and pleading for her help. At first, she was hesitant, but as I revealed the depth of Derek's cruelty and Gwen's complicity, her resolve hardened. That boy has always been a disappointment, she fumed, and to think his mother enabled such despicable behavior? It's unforgivable. With May on board, our plan began to take shape. She agreed to withhold the inheritance from Derek and Gwen unless they made amends for their actions, essentially leaving them financially destitute. As the preparations continued, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empowerment coursing through me. For years I had been the victim, cowering in fear and submission. But now the tables had turned, and it was my turn to dictate the terms of our engagement. Derek and Gwen had no idea what was coming, but they would soon learn the true price of their cruelty. With each step we took, I could feel the weight of their oppression lifting, replaced by a newfound strength and determination. This was more than just revenge, it was a reclamation of my dignity, a declaration that I would no longer be defined by their abuse. I was taking back control of my life, and nothing would stand in my way. As the plan solidified, I found myself growing more confident, more assertive. The old Lila, the meek and submissive doormat, was gone. In her place stood a woman emboldened, a warrior ready to fight for her rightful place in the world. And when the time came to confront Derek and Gwen, to unveil the truth and watch their carefully constructed facade crumble around them, I would savor every moment. They had sown the seeds of their own destruction, and I would be there to reap the bitter harvest, a testament to the power of resilience and the indomitable human spirit. A week after I left Derek, my phone rang. It was him, no doubt looking to smooth things over with empty promises and hollow apologies. I steeled myself before answering, determined not to let his manipulations sway me. "What do you want, Derek?" I asked, my voice firm. "Lila, listen," he began, his tone sickly sweet. "I think we've both said some things we didn't mean. Why don't you come back home, and we can work this out like adults?" I scoffed. "Work it out? You mean like how we've worked it out for the past few years, with you berating and belittling me at every turn?" "That's in the past," he insisted. "I've changed, I promise. Things will be different." I could practically hear the smugness dripping from his words, as if he expected me to come crawling back at the first sign of his supposed contrition. "Save it, Derek," I spat. "I'm not falling for your lies anymore. I want a divorce, and I'm not going to let you sweet-talk your way out of this." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when he spoke again, his voice was laced with barely contained fury. "Listen here, you ungrateful little wench. You're going to sign those divorce papers, and you're going to do it without causing any trouble. You got that?" I smiled, unfazed by his empty threats. "Or what, Derek? You'll insult me some more? Throw a tantrum like a petulant child? I'm not afraid of you anymore." He sputtered, caught off guard by my newfound defiance. "You'll regret this, Lila. Mark my words, I'll make your life a living hell." "I doubt that," I replied coolly. "In fact, I think it's going to be the other way around. You and your mother are going to pay for every ounce of pain and humiliation you've put me through." With that, I ended the call, a sense of triumph surging through me. The old Derek, with his empty bravado and hollow threats, no longer held any power over me. Over the next few days, Jason, Emma, May, and I finalized our plan. We gathered all the evidence we could find, from financial records to social media posts, painting a damning picture of Derek's misdeeds and Gwen's complicity. As the day of our confrontation approached, I could feel the anticipation building within me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to strip away their false bravado and expose them for the cruel, vile people they truly were. We rehearsed the confrontation, going over every detail with meticulous care. I practiced my lines, my body language, determined to project an aura of confidence and strength that would leave no room for doubt. Finally, the day arrived. I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves as I approached the house I had once called home. Even from the outside, I could sense an uneasy cleanliness, as if Derek had already moved on and brought his mistress in before our separation was finalized. As I stepped inside, the stale air hit me like a slap in the face, a reminder of the oppressive atmosphere that had once permeated these walls. But now the tables had turned, and it was my turn to dictate the terms of our engagement. Derek and Gwen sat in the living room, their expressions a mix of surprise and contempt. Before they could utter a word, I launched into my prepared speech, laying out the evidence of their cruelty and financial misdeeds with surgical precision. As I spoke, I could see the color drain from their faces, the realization of their impending downfall slowly sinking in. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, utterly blindsided by the depth of our preparations. And then, just as I was about to deliver the final blow, the front door opened and May stepped inside, her steely gaze sweeping over the room. "Hello, nephew," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "It seems we have much to discuss." The look on Derek and Gwen's faces as May entered the room was priceless. Their smug arrogance melted away, replaced by a mixture of fear and disbelief. They knew, in that moment, that the game was up. "Aunt May," Derek stammered, attempting to regain his composure. "What are you doing here?" May fixed him with a withering glare. "Don't play dumb with me, boy. I'm here because of the shameful way you've treated this poor woman." She gestured towards me, her lips pressed into a thin line. Gwen, never one to back down, tried to interject. "Now, May, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Derek and Lila are just going through a rough patch, that's all." "A rough patch?" May scoffed. "From what I've heard, this has been going on for years. Years of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and outright cruelty." I watched as Derek's face contorted with rage, his fists clenching at his sides. "Who have you been talking to? Lila's been filling your head with lies, trying to turn you against me." "Enough of your lies, Derek," I spat, stepping forward. "I have all the proof I need right here." I brandished a thick folder stuffed with documentation of his misdeeds. Gwen's eyes widened as she caught sight of the folder, and her complexion paled. "Derek, what have you done?" Before he could respond, I launched into my prepared speech, laying out the evidence of his gambling addiction, his financial mismanagement, and his vile online rants about me. With each word, I could see the confidence draining from their faces, replaced by a growing sense of dread. "And that's not all," I continued, my voice ringing out with newfound strength. "I have witnesses, people who can attest to the years of abuse I've endured at your hands." As if on cue, Jason and Emma entered the room, their expressions steely and resolute. They stood beside me, a united front against the crumbling facade of Derek and Gwen's lies. Derek's gaze darted from me to Jason, then back again, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Gwen, for once, was rendered speechless, her usual bravado nowhere to be found. It was at that moment that the front door opened once more, and a young woman stepped inside. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene before her, clearly not expecting such a confrontation. "Blake?" Derek croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman, Blake apparently, fixed him with a look of utter disgust. "You lied to me," she hissed. "You told me you were single, that you were ready for a committed relationship." Derek opened his mouth to respond, but May cut him off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Don't bother, Derek. Your web of deceit has unraveled, and we've all seen the truth." She turned to Blake, her expression softening slightly. "I'm sorry you got caught up in this mess, dear, but rest assured, my nephew and his mother will face the consequences of their actions." Blake nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I want nothing more to do with him," she spat, shooting Derek a venomous glare before storming out. The room fell silent, the weight of the confrontation hanging heavy in the air. Derek and Gwen sat frozen, their carefully constructed facade of lies and deception crumbling around them, and as I looked at their stunned faces, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication wash over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when the scales of justice finally tipped in my favor. With a deep breath, I gathered my strength and delivered the final blow. "Derek, Gwen, your reign of terror is over. I'm suing for alimony and restitution, and I won't stop until you've paid for every ounce of suffering you've caused me." Their reactions were priceless, a mixture of disbelief, anger, and fear that left me savoring the sweet taste of revenge. They had sown the seeds of their own destruction, and now they would reap the bitter harvest. As I turned and walked out the door, Jason and Emma by my side, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The shackles of oppression had been broken, and I was finally free. Free to live my life on my own terms, to embrace the future with courage and determination. And as for Derek and Gwen, their day of reckoning was just beginning. The aftermath of the confrontation was like a whirlwind, with events unfolding at a dizzying pace. As Blake stormed out, her face twisted with rage and betrayal, Derek made one last-ditch effort to salvage his crumbling lies. "You can't seriously believe her," he sneered, gesturing towards me. "She's just trying to turn everyone against me, to take me for everything I've got." I fixed him with a steely glare, unfazed by his pathetic attempts at manipulation. "Save your breath, Derek. The jig is up and you know it." Jason stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "Don't even try it, man. We have more than enough evidence to bury you in court." "Evidence?" Gwen scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "What kind of evidence could you possibly have?" In response, I tossed the thick folder onto the coffee table, its contents spilling out in a cascade of damning documentation. Financial records, printouts of Derek's online rants, even photos and witness statements. It was all there, laid bare for them to see. Derek's face paled as he rifled through the papers, his hands trembling with barely contained fury. "Where did you get all this?" he demanded, his voice rising in pitch. "That's not important," May interjected, her tone stern. "What's important is that we now know the truth about your gambling addiction, your financial misdeeds, and your despicable treatment of Lila." Gwen opened her mouth to protest, but May silenced her with a withering glare. "Don't even try to defend him, Gwen. You're just as culpable in all this, enabling his behavior and joining in on the abuse." Derek's eyes darted around the room, searching for any shred of support or sympathy, but he found none, only the cold, hard reality of his lies and misdeeds laid bare before him. "You can't do this to me," he snarled, his fists clenched at his sides. "I'll fight this, every step of the way. You won't get a damn cent from me." I couldn't help but laugh at his empty bravado, his desperate attempts to cling to the illusion of power. "Oh, but we will, Derek. We'll take everything from you, just like you tried to take everything from me." Emma stepped forward, her expression one of steely determination. "We're not just going after you for alimony and restitution. We're going to make sure you face the full consequences of your actions, legally and financially." Derek's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from his body as the weight of our words sank in. He knew, in that moment, that he had lost. That his carefully constructed web of lies and deceit had finally unraveled, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. Gwen, ever the loyal enabler, tried one last time to defend her precious son. "This is outrageous," she spat. "You can't just come into our home and make these wild accusations." But May wasn't having it. She turned to her sister-in-law, her eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. "Enough, Gwen. Enough of your blind loyalty and willful ignorance. It ends here, today." With a heavy sigh, May reached into her purse and withdrew a thick envelope. "This is my last will and testament," she announced, her voice ringing out with finality. "And as of this moment, both you and Derek are hereby disinherited." The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the sharp intake of breath from Derek and Gwen. Their faces, once so smug and arrogant, now twisted into masks of disbelief and horror. "You can't do that," Derek sputtered, his voice weak and hollow. But May simply shook her head, her expression unyielding. "I can, and I have. Consider it the price you must pay for your cruelty and deceit." And just like that, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Derek and Gwen, stripped of their ill-gotten wealth and inheritance, were left to face the harsh reality of their actions. Their world, once so carefully constructed on a foundation of lies and manipulation, had crumbled to dust. As I looked at their defeated faces, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph wash over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when justice was finally served, when the scales were balanced in my favor. And as I turned and walked away, leaving Derek and Gwen to wallow in the wreckage of their own making, I knew that this was just the beginning. The future was mine to shape, to mold into something beautiful and fulfilling, a future free from the shackles of their oppression. The road ahead would be long, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive, empowered by the knowledge that I had taken back control of my life. And as for Derek and Gwen, well, they would have plenty of time to reflect on the consequences of their actions, to learn the bitter lesson that karma has a way of evening the score. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional upheaval. True to my word, I pursued alimony and restitution from Derek with relentless determination, leaving no stone unturned in my quest for justice. With the mountains of evidence we had gathered, my lawyer made short work of Derek's feeble attempts at defense, his gambling debts, his online rants, and his emotional abuse. It was all laid bare for the court to see, painting a damning picture of his true character. Derek and Gwen, now disgraced and disinherited, could do little more than seethe in impotent rage as the legal system ground them down, stripping them of their ill-gotten wealth and privilege. With each court ruling in my favor, I could see the life draining from their eyes, the realization setting in that their reign of terror was truly at an end. And through it all, I stood tall and unwavering, bolstered by the support of Jason, Emma, and May. They were my rock, my foundation in the face of Derek and Gwen's increasingly desperate attempts to salvage their crumbling empire. "You'll regret this, Lila," Derek spat one day after a particularly devastating court ruling. "Mark my words, you'll never know peace as long as I'm breathing." I fixed him with a steely glare, his empty threats bouncing off me like water off a duck's back. "Save your breath, Derek. You've lost, and you know it. It's time you accepted the consequences of your actions." With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving him to stew in his own impotent rage. His threats were hollow, his power stripped away by the weight of his own misdeeds. As the legal battles raged on, I found myself slowly shedding the shackles of my past, the weight of Derek and Gwen's oppression lifting from my shoulders. With each victory, each hard-won settlement or ruling in my favor, I felt a renewed sense of strength and determination, a fire burning within me that could not be extinguished. And as the dust finally settled, the final judgments handed down, I found myself in a position I never could have imagined. Financially secure, emotionally liberated, and finally free from the chains of my toxic marriage. Derek and Gwen, on the other hand, were left destitute and disgraced, their once lofty status crumbling around them like a house of cards. May had seen to it that they were evicted from the family home, left to fend for themselves in the harsh reality they had so callously inflicted upon others. As I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by the trappings of my newfound independence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over me. I had fought the good fight, weathered the storm of their cruelty, and emerged victorious, a testament to the indomitable human spirit and the power of resilience. In the months that followed, I threw myself into my career with renewed vigor, channeling my newfound confidence and determination into every aspect of my work. It wasn't long before my efforts were rewarded, and I found myself promoted to a senior position within the firm, a testament to my skills and dedication. But perhaps more importantly, I began to rediscover the parts of myself that had been suppressed for so long. My passions, my dreams, and my zest for life. I took up new hobbies, explored new interests, and surrounded myself with people who truly cared for me, who supported and uplifted me rather than tearing me down. And as for the prospect of a new relationship, well, I wasn't closing that door entirely. But this time I vowed to approach it with wisdom and discernment, never again allowing myself to be subjugated or diminished by another person's cruelty or insecurity. As I stood on the balcony of my apartment one evening, gazing out over the twinkling lights of the city, I couldn't help but marvel at the journey I had taken. From the depths of emotional and financial despair, I had risen like a phoenix from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. And in that moment, I made a silent vow, a vow to never again allow anyone to strip me of my dignity or self-worth. I was the master of my own destiny, the architect of my own future, and no one, not Derek, not Gwen, nor anyone else, could ever take that away from me again. With a deep breath and a smile on my face, I turned and went back inside, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life with open arms and an unwavering spirit. The past was behind me, and the future lay ahead, brimming with possibilities and the promise of a life truly lived on my own terms. "Mom, can we go to Aunt Rose's cabin this summer? I miss the animals and the open fields," Ellie said, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. I glanced at her from the kitchen sink, wiped my hands on a towel, and smiled. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll go as soon as school is out." Ellie beamed, her face lighting up the room. Derek, my husband, sat at the dining table, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up. "Can't you two ever stay home? This cabin obsession is ridiculous." "Derek, it's just a few weeks. Ellie loves it there, and so do I said, my voice calm but firm. Ellie, undeterred by her father's lack of enthusiasm, joined in. "Yes, I can't wait to help Aunt Rose with the animals again." Derek sighed, tapping incessantly on his phone. "Well, don't expect me to join. I've got too much work. Projects don't manage themselves." "Fine," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "We'll manage without you." His eyes finally met mine, a flicker of frustration surfacing. "Just make sure you stay reachable. I don't want the same issue as last time." I nodded, turning back to Ellie. "Start packing your things, kiddo. We leave Saturday morning." Ellie dashed out of the room, her excitement palpable. Derek pushed his chair back noisily, the legs scraping against the floor. "Anyway, I'm heading out. Got a late meeting," he muttered, picking up his briefcase. Still clutching the towel, I watched him walk towards the door. "Don't wait up," he added before leaving without a second glance. The door clicked shut, leaving a silence that felt heavier than it should have. Saturday arrived swiftly. The drive to Rose's cabin was long but peaceful. Ellie sang along to her favorite songs as we navigated through winding roads and lush forests. When we finally pulled up to the cabin, Rose was already outside, waving enthusiastically. "Aunt Rose!" Ellie hollered, leaping out of the car and sprinting towards her. Rose caught her in a big hug, laughing heartily. "Look at you! You've grown since I last saw you," Rose exclaimed, ruffling Ellie's hair. I joined them, giving Rose a tight hug. "It's good to be here," I admitted, breathing in the crisp mountain air. "Come on in." "Maxwell's inside making lunch," Rose said, guiding us towards the door. Inside, the cabin smelled like home. Fresh bread, herbs, and a hint of something sweet. Maxwell, Rose's husband, greeted us with his apron on, brandishing a spatula like a knight with his sword. "Ladies, welcome back. Ready for some homemade lasagna?" he asked, grinning widely. As we settled in, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, the opposite of the tension back at home. Ellie quickly got busy helping Rose feed the animals while I unpacked. That evening, we all sat around the dinner table, the warm glow of the cabin's light casting cozy shadows. Ellie chatted with Rose and Maxwell about school, her friends, and excitement for summer. Rose glanced at me, her eyes silently asking how things were. I gave her a small nod, indicating we'd talk later. Later that night, while Ellie slept soundly in the loft, Rose and I sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the cool night air. "So, how's Derek?" Rose asked cautiously. "Working as usual," I replied, taking a sip from my mug. "Things aren't great, Rose. He's distant, always working or on his phone," Rose sighed. "I see. And you? How are you holding up?" "One day at a time," I said, forcing a smile. "But being here helps. It's like a breath of fresh air after years of suffocation." Rose reached over and squeezed my hand. "Remember, you always have us. This place is as much yours as it is ours." The weight of her words settled over me, filling me with a sense of hope and strength I hadn't felt in a while. Watching the stars twinkle above, I allowed myself to imagine a future, one where Ellie and I found true happiness, even if that meant breaking away from Derek's oppressive indifference. Sunday morning at the cabin started with the sounds of roosters crowing and cows mooing. Ellie was already up and about, helping Rose with the morning chores. I could hear her giggles drifting through the open window as I slowly woke up, appreciating the quiet bustle of the farm. I grabbed a cup of coffee and walked outside to join them. Ellie was brushing one of the horses, her face aglow with happiness. Rose gave me a knowing smile from the chicken coop. "Morning, sis. Ready to dive into farm life?" she teased, scattering feed for the clucking chickens. "I'm ready," I answered, taking a sip of my coffee and feeling more at peace than I had in months. Entering the barn, I noticed the walls covered with old family photos and memorabilia. One picture showed Rose and me as kids, sitting on the same horse Ellie was now brushing. This place was full of history and life, everything my suburban home wasn't. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a message from Derek. "Where are the files I asked for? This is urgent." I replied quickly, hands trembling slightly. "I sent them last night. Did you check your email?" His reply came swiftly. "Check again. They're not there. Why can't you do anything, right?" Rose must have seen the tension on my face. She walked over, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Is it Derek?" "Yeah, he's on about work, as usual." I sighed, pocketing my phone. Rose raised an eyebrow. "He should know you're on break. Doesn't he try to grasp family time at all?" I shook my head, feeling a knot tighten in my chest. "Let's not talk about him right now. What's next on our farm to-do list?" By the afternoon, Maxwell and Ellie had convinced me to join them in the fields to check on the crops. I watched as Ellie ran happily between the rows, her hair catching the golden light. This was what freedom felt like. Maxwell handed me a basket. "Think you can handle picking tomatoes?" "I think I can manage," I replied with a smile, bending down to start picking the ripe, red fruits. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed again, but this time I ignored it, focusing instead on the weight of the tomatoes in my hand and the richness of the soil beneath my feet. Later that day, Derek called. His voice was sharp, cutting through the serenity of the farm like a knife. "Why didn't you respond to my texts? What's so important there that you can't manage a simple email?" "We're busy here, Derek. It's good for Ellie to be outside, you know?" I answered, trying to keep my tone even. "She needs stability, not to be dragged off to the middle of nowhere," he retorted. I turned away from the house, looking out at the rolling fields. "She's stable here, happier than she's been in a long time." A heavy silence hung on the line before Derek spoke again, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Well, enjoy playing farmer. Don't count on me rescuing you when this little fantasy falls apart." As the call ended, I felt a wave of emotion swell inside me. Anger, frustration, and a fierce protectiveness towards Ellie and our time at the cabin. Rose came up behind me, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Hey, everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just Derek being Derek." Rose nodded knowingly. "He'll never understand this life, but that's his loss, not ours." Looking around at the calm and beauty surrounding us, I realized Rose was right. Derek might never get it, but that wasn't my problem anymore. Here in the mountains, I felt a sense of clarity and strength, a place where our lives could be rebuilt, one simple, fulfilling day at a time. We had been at Rose's cabin for a little over a week when Ellie came rushing in with wide eyes. "Mom, I saw a fox near the chicken coop. He was trying to get in." Rose looked up from the kitchen table, concern etched on her face. "A fox? That's not good. We need to secure the coop better." Ellie nodded earnestly. "Can we build something to protect the chickens?" Rose smiled. "Sure thing. We can make a stronger fence and set up some lights to scare it away." I was getting coffee when an idea hit me. Actually, I read about a new eco-friendly project at work. It uses renewable energy to create deterrents for predators. Maybe we could apply that to the farm. "Really, Mom? That sounds cool." Ellie's eyes sparkled with renewed excitement. Rose got up, intrigued. "Tell me more about it." I explained the concept, feeling a surge of enthusiasm. It's an ecotech project. It's solar-powered lights and sounds to keep predators away without harming them. I could talk to my boss and see if we could test it out here. Maxwell chimed in from the doorway. "Sounds like a great idea. Anything to keep the chickens safe and maybe even make things more sustainable around here." A few days later, I broached the project idea with my boss during a video call. I was thinking maybe we could pilot our ecotech project at my sister's farm. It's perfect for testing renewable energy solutions. My boss, a middle-aged man with a kind face, nodded thoughtfully. "That's an interesting proposal, Hannah. If it works, it could be a great case study. Go ahead and draft a plan, and we'll review it." I felt a jolt of excitement as I hung up the call. Ellie had overheard the conversation and came running. "Mom, are we really going to help Aunt Rose with your project?" "Yes, Ellie. If it gets approved, it'll be a great help to the farm." That night, I couldn't help but share the news with Derek, hoping for a small sign of encouragement. "I talked to my boss about the eco project. He's interested. We might get to pilot it here." Derek snorted. "You're really planning to dig in the dirt now? How ambitious." I clenched my teeth, trying to keep calm. "It's not about dirt. It's about making a difference, using what I know to help my family." He scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "Just make sure you don't mess it up. I can't have you falling behind at work because of this ridiculous farm fantasy." I hung up, feeling a mix of anger and determination. Derek's words stung, but they also fueled my resolve. This project wasn't just about the farm, it was a chance to show him and myself what I was capable of. After that call, Rose found me sitting on the porch, looking out at the darkened fields. "Rough conversation?" I nodded. "Derek doesn't believe I can do it, but I need to prove him wrong for Ellie's sake and mine." Rose sat down beside me, her presence comforting. "You've got this, Hannah. Whatever you need, we're here to support you." Hearing those words gave me the strength to push forward. I went back inside, ready to start drafting a detailed plan for the ecotech project. As the days went by, I poured myself into the proposal, detailing every step and potential outcome. Each part of the plan felt like one more way to break free from Derek's toxic grip, to create a better future for Ellie and me. Finally, I submitted the plan to my boss. Now, all that was left was to wait for approval, but deep down, I knew I was already moving forward. Here at the cabin, we had started something real, something that could change everything. The sun was setting when Ellie wandered into the living room, her face thoughtful. "Mom, I saw Daddy with a lady today." I glanced up from my laptop, my heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "While we were driving back from town, he was at a cafe with a lady. They were holding hands." The room seemed to close in around me. Rose, sitting nearby, caught my eye. She looked as shocked as I felt. "Did you recognize her?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Ellie shook her head. "No, but they looked very friendly." I nodded slowly, masking my emotions. "Thanks for telling me, Ellie. Matt, why don't you go finish your homework?" Once Ellie had left the room, Rose leaned in, concerned. "What do you think is going on, Hannah?" I exhaled deeply. "I don't know, but it's time I found out for sure." The next day, I decided to call a private investigator. The idea of an affair had tormented me before, but Ellie's observation pushed me to act. I listed all the details I knew, feeling a mix of dread and determination. As days went by, I fell into a routine at the cabin, masking my anxiety with work on the eco project. Then the investigator called. "Hannah, I have some information. Derek's been meeting a woman regularly. I have photos and messages." My stomach churned, but I steadied myself. "Send me everything." The evidence came through email, a series of incriminating photos, clearly showing Derek and a woman at various places. My hands shook as I clicked on the messages, reading his flirtatious and deceitful words. With a deep breath, I called Derek. "We need to talk." He sighed loudly. "What now, Hannah?" "I know about her. I've seen the messages and the photos." There was a pause before he responded, aggravation dripping from his voice. "So what? Was it your little detective act that uncovered this? You were never here anyway, always off playing farmer." I clenched my fists, the anger building. "I was here for our daughter and our family. You're the one who shirked responsibility." His laugh was cold and unfeeling. "Responsibility, right? Look, don't pretend you're some saint. Enjoy your cabin life while it lasts." I could hear the contempt in his words, but it only steeled my resolve. "Derek, I'm done. I deserve better. Ellie deserves better. I'm starting divorce proceedings." Silence lingered before he spoke, voice rigid with controlled rage. "Fine, do whatever you think you have to, but don't expect this to be easy." Hanging up, I felt a strange relief wash over me. It was time to move forward, free from his deceit and toxic presence. I found Rose in the garden, her hands deep in the soil. "How did it go?" she asked, wiping dirt off her hands. "I told him it's over," I replied, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "I'm going to start the proceedings. It's time, for me and for Ellie." Rose stood and hugged me. "Good for you, Hannah. We'll do this together." As the days passed, I started gathering everything needed for the legal battle ahead. The cabin felt more like home with each passing day, a place where Ellie and I could build a new life, one honest step at a time. With support from Rose and Maxwell, I contacted a lawyer to begin the divorce process. The road ahead was daunting, but for the first time in a long time, I felt empowered. Our new beginning was within reach, firmly rooted in the love and strength of family. I stepped into the lawyer's office, my heart pounding. A young assistant guided me to a sleek conference room where a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a confident smile greeted me. "Ms. Anderson, I'm Karen Mitchell. Please, sit down," she said. extending her hand. Shaking her hand, I sat down. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." Karen leaned forward, her demeanor professional yet warm. "Let's get straight to it. You've decided to file for divorce. Tell me everything." I recounted the recent events, culminating with Derek's blatant admission of infidelity. Karen took notes, nodding occasionally. "We need to gather all possible evidence of his misconduct. This will strengthen your case, especially concerning alimony and child support." A sudden thought struck me. Derek's former colleague, Karen, might help. She's openly despised him since he mishandled a project that cost her a promotion. Karen arched an eyebrow. "Do you think she'd testify against him?" "I believe she would. She's got no love lost for Derek." Karen smiled. "Good. I'll contact her." Leaving the office, I felt the first flickers of hope. I was taking steps, concrete steps, towards a better future for Ellie and me. The sense of forward movement was empowering. Back at the cabin, Ellie met me at the door. "Mom, how did it go?" I knelt down, hugging her tightly. "We're making progress, Ellie. We're going to be okay." A few days later, Karen, Derek's former colleague, agreed to meet us at a local cafe. She was a tall woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, her eyes sharp and assessing. "So, Derek finally screwed up enough for you to leave him, huh?" Karen said, sipping her coffee. I nodded, feeling a pang of hurt at the bluntness. "He's been having an affair. I need to prove his irresponsibility, especially financially." Karen leaned in slightly. "Believe me, I've got dirt on Derek. He's been fudging accounts and embezzling funds." My stomach turned. "Can you prove this?" Karen gave a wicked smile. "I've got emails, transaction records, the works. I've been saving them for an occasion exactly like this." Later, I shared the news with Rose and Maxwell at the dinner table. Ellie was at her friend's house, so it was just the three of us. "Karen's going to help. She has proof Derek's been embezzling," I said. Rose's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Embezzling? That changes everything." Maxwell nodded. "If he's guilty of fraud, we've got leverage. He can't brush this off or bully you into submission." Armed with Karen's evidence, I felt more prepared than ever. The next week dragged by in a blur of legal preparations and emotional turmoil. Finally, the day of confrontation arrived. Derek showed up at the lawyer's office, his expression a mix of anger and defiance. "What's this about, Hannah? More baseless accusations?" I stood tall, Karen by my side. "No, Derek, this is about your fraudulent activities and how you've wronged our family." The color drained from his face, disbelief and rage battling for dominance. "You're bluffing," he spat. Karen laid out the evidence calmly, piece by piece. Derek's facade crumbled as he realized the gravity of his situation. "This is insane. You can't trust her. She's lying." Karen looked unperturbed. "The court will decide that, Mr. Anderson." I watched Derek, his composure shattering, revealing the scared, selfish man beneath. "What do you want?" he finally muttered, beaten. "I want a fair divorce settlement, full custody of Ellie, and alimony," I stated firmly. Derek's eyes were cold, but he knew there was no escape. "Fine, take what you want, just get out of my life." As I walked out of the office, a mixture of relief and resolve flooded me. Rose and Maxwell were waiting outside, their faces alight with anticipation. "It's over?" I told them, my voice steady. "We've won the first battle." Rose hugged me tightly. "You did it, Hannah. Now it's time for the next chapter." Maxwell clapped me on the back. "Onwards and upwards, sister." With their support and the evidence in our favor, the future began to glow with promise. It was time to build a new life, one where Ellie and I could truly thrive. The courtroom buzzed with hushed whispers as I took my seat next to Karen. Derek's attorney, a grizzled man with a stern face, shuffled papers at the opposite table. Derek sat beside him, glaring at me with a mixture of anger and desperation. Karen leaned over, her voice low but reassuring. "Stick to the facts. We have all the evidence we need." The judge, a stern-looking man with glasses perched on the tip of his nose, banged his gavel. "Court is now in session for the case of Anderson versus Anderson." Derek's lawyer stood up first, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "Your Honor, we contend that Mrs. Anderson is exaggerating claims of misconduct to gain an unfair advantage in the divorce settlement." I felt a surge of anger, but Karen squeezed my arm subtly, grounding me. When it was our turn, Karen presented the evidence methodically, starting with Derek's infidelity. "Your Honor, here are messages proving Mr. Anderson's affair," she said, handing the judge a folder. The judge glanced over the papers, then looked at Derek. Mr. Anderson, do you deny the validity of these messages? Derek remained silent, his face a mix of defiance and fear. Next, Karen presented the evidence of embezzlement. She displayed emails, bank statements, and transaction records, each a nail in Derek's coffin. This evidence clearly highlights Mr. Anderson's fraudulent activities, which have compromised not only his marriage, but also his professional integrity, Karen stated firmly. Derek's lawyer attempted to object, but the judge silenced him with a wave of his hand. Mr. Anderson, do you have any defense for these claims? Derek stood up, his facade crumbling. These are lies, fabrications to ruin me. The judge's gaze was cold. The evidence speaks loud and clear, Mr. Anderson. Karen shot me a supportive glance. It was time for the final blow. Karen stood up. Your Honor, we ask for full custody of Ellie Anderson, alimony, and that Mr. Anderson be held accountable for his fraudulent actions. Derek exploded. This is a setup. She's turning my daughter against me. The judge banged his gavel again, bringing order to the chaos. Mr. Anderson, enough. I will review the evidence and issue a ruling shortly. We left the courtroom to wait for the judge's decision, my nerves stretched thin. Rose and Maxwell arrived, bringing comfort and moral support. Finally, the judge called us back in. As everyone settled, he looked straight at Derek, his voice firm. Based on the overwhelming evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct, this court grants Mrs. Daff Anderson full custody of Ellie Anderson, as well as alimony and child support. Furthermore, I am referring Mr. Anderson's fraudulent activities to the appropriate authorities. Derek's face turned white, then red with fury. This is a witch hunt, he screamed. You can't do this to me. Karen stood up, unflappable. Justice has been served, Mr. Anderson. The judge banged his gavel one last time. Court is adjourned. As we filed out, a weight lifted off my shoulders. Rose hugged me tightly, her eyes filled with tears of relief. It's finally over, Hannah. You did it. Ellie, who had been waiting with Maxwell in the hallway, ran up to me. Mom, are we really away from Dad now? I picked her up, holding her close. Yes, sweetheart, we're free. Maxwell clapped me on the back. Time to start that new chapter, huh? I nodded, my heart swelling with hope. With Derek facing legal consequences and having lost the fight, the path was clear. Karen shook my hand warmly. You were strong through this, Hannah. Now, go make that new life you deserve. As we left the courthouse, I felt a sense of renewal. The battle had been fierce, but we had emerged victorious. The road ahead was bright and open, ready for us to walk it together as a family. Weeks after the court's ruling, the news about Derek's financial misconduct spread like wildfire. His once commanding presence at work was reduced to whispers and suspicious glances. One afternoon, Karen called me. Hannah, have you seen the news? No. Why? I asked, sensing something significant. Derek's been fired. The board found out about his embezzlement. They've terminated his contract. I felt a rush of satisfaction. He's really facing the consequences now. Karen chuckled. It's far from over. He's being investigated by the authorities for fraud. He won't be getting away with anything. At home, Rose and I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. Later that evening, Ellie and I sat on the porch, the sky painted with the hues of sunset. Mom, will Daddy be okay? She asked softly. I looked at her, choosing my words carefully. He made bad choices, sweetie. Now he has to face the music. But you and I, we're safe, and that's what matters. News outlets soon picked up Derek's story, his name plastered with accusations and scandal. One day Karen called again, sounding triumphant. Hannah, the judge ruled that Derek must pay full child support and alimony. They've frozen his assets to cover it. I felt a mix of relief and triumph. Thank you, Karen. You've been incredible through all this. My pleasure, Hannah. Now go enjoy your life. The following weeks brought more signs of Derek's downfall. He tried to contact me several times, but I ignored his calls. One evening, I finally picked up, anticipating his outrage. You've ruined my life, Hannah. Derek's voice was a blend of anger and desperation. You did this to yourself, Derek, I replied evenly. You made your choices. Now live with them. Do you think you're so perfect? You're just hiding on that stupid farm, pretending everything's okay, he sneered. I took a deep breath, holding back a retort. Ellie and I are happy, Derek. We're moving on, and you should do the same. Slamming the phone down, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Derek's words couldn't hurt us anymore. A few days later, Rose came rushing into the cabin with the newspaper. "Hannah, look at this!" The headline read, "Former executive faces jail time for fraud." The article detailed Derek's impending court dates and the serious charges against him. Maxwell clapped his hands, grinning. "Looks like karma finally caught up with him." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of closure. It's over. Really over. Ellie joined us, her face curious. "What's going on?" I hugged her tightly. "Nothing to worry about, sweetie. Just some old news. We're free now." Ellie's smile reaffirmed what I felt inside. The shadow Derek had cast over our lives was gone. We could now embrace the future without looking back. As Derek's life unraveled, ours blossomed. The ecotech project at the farm began to thrive, bringing new energy and purpose. Ellie adapted to her new school, making friends and finding joy in the simple pleasures of one evening. As we finished dinner, Ellie looked at me with excitement. "Mom, can we invite my friends over to see the farm? They'd love it here." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "Of course, Ellie. This is our home, and we should share it." Rose and Maxwell nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting the sentiment. With each passing day, the cabin felt more like home, a place of healing and growth. As the sun set on our past struggles, I knew we were ready to embrace whatever future awaited us, brimming with newfound strength and hope. The final court ruling had made it clear Derek had lost everything. Seeing the news, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. But my focus now was entirely on building a new life for Ellie and myself. We officially moved into Rose's cabin. The small space felt cozy and welcoming, filled with the smell of fresh bread and the sound of laughter, elements drastically missing from our old home. Ellie thrived, her once anxious demeanor replaced by a radiant smile. One crisp morning, as we sipped our coffee on the porch, Rose turned to me. "Guess what? The ecotech project got mentioned in the local paper again. They're calling it a model for sustainable farming." "That's fantastic news, Rose," I exclaimed, feeling immense pride and relief. That afternoon, Ellie had her friends over. They fed the chickens, ran through the fields, and took turns on the tire swing. Their laughter echoed, filling the space with youthful joy. "Mom, I love it here," Ellie said, throwing her arms around me. "I never want to leave." "I'm glad, Ellie. This is our home now," I replied, hugging her back tightly. Meanwhile, Derek took every opportunity to try disrupting our peace. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, my phone buzzed with a message. "Derek again?" Rose asked, seeing my face tense. "Let's see." I opened the message. Derek had somehow found out about our success with the ecotech project. "Enjoy your little success while it lasts. You're nothing without me," his text read. I rolled my eyes, showing it to Rose and Maxwell. "He's desperate," Maxwell remarked. "Ignore him." Agreed. Rose said, "He's just trying to rattle you." I nodded, blocking his number. "He can't touch us now. We're stronger than he thinks." Over the next months, Derek's situation worsened. He lost his house and friends, his reputation in tatters. Occasionally, I'd hear bits of news about his struggles, but I remained focused on our new life. His downfall was a testament to the karma that had finally caught up with him. One morning, we were interrupted by an unexpected knock at the door. Karen stood there, looking pleased. "Good news," she announced. "Derek's been sentenced to prison for fraud. The chapter is truly closed." A rush of relief swept over me. "Thank you, Karen, for everything." "You earned this, Hannah," she replied. "Now, live your best life." As Karen left, Rose clapped her hands, gathering everyone outside. "This calls for a celebration." We spent the day enjoying an impromptu barbecue, Ellie playing with her friends and Maxwell strumming his guitar. The air was filled with laughter and music, a sharp contrast to the struggle and pain we'd endured. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ellie snuggled up beside me, her eyes reflecting the twinkling stars. "Mom, I'm so glad we're here. I feel free," she said softly. I kissed her forehead. "Me too, Ellie. We're exactly where we belong." That night, as everyone settled into the cabin, I took a moment to step outside. The sky was clear and the stars shone brightly. I breathed in the fresh mountain air, feeling the weight of the past lift completely. Our new beginning wasn't without its challenges, but it was filled with hope and endless possibilities. Here, surrounded by family and nature, we had found our sanctuary. And as Derek faced the consequences of his actions, I felt a deep sense of justice. This life, this freedom, was the karma he could never touch. For Ellie and me, it was a testament to our resilience and a promise of a brighter future.